Yeah, man.
You come through.
Another thing G does better than anyone is break down some of the quarterback tape. And G, we talked about Jalen Milroe yesterday. I want to play you guys a shot from Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl. Who I guess, Dustin, you know.
I know him very well.
Jim's a nice guy.
Yeah, Jim's the best, man.
Yeah, he was asked about this year's quarterback class compared to last year's quarterback class, and this was Jim Nagy's answer on that. Steve, play.
I think there's some guys that the league is still trying to figure out for different reasons. Like last year, it's certainly not last year. I don't know if anyone in this class would be in the top 6 of the guys last year. I don't know if any of these guys are Bo Nix or Penix or J.J. McCarthy. That's a unique class. I think we're going to look back in 15 years, the class of 2024 is one of the best classes ever.
That was Jim Nagy's opinion. He's just one person, but that's kind of the consensus that last year's class was incredible. This year's class, not nearly as high. Dustin, what makes – well, A, what do you think of Nagy's soundbite? And then 2, why is it so hard to evaluate the quarterback position?
Because there's so much that goes into it. It's not just talent. It's not just size. There's so many – intangibles that you just can't see on film. And frankly, there's not enough time for these teams to evaluate these players unless they start digging in on these kids when they're like in high school. You know what I mean? Like, you got to really know about how these kids tick, these young men tick, I should say. And that's the hardest part. You don't know how someone's going to respond when they get a little bit of money in their pocket, when they've got, what's their friend circle like. Like, those are the things that ultimately can factor in. And then, can a kid learn an offense? What sort of offense are you going to put him in? The coordinator and the head coach, are they going to mold their offense around this guy's skill set, his strengths? Like, there's so many different variables that go into it, which is why you see guys who are drafted high, go to a team, fail, and a lot of times recently, and we've seen it with guys like Baker and Darnold as of late that have gone other places, Geno Smith, had success because of the system and the opportunity. So and by the way, it's not just always the player, it's where the player goes.
Yes.
And I can tell you from firsthand experience, when I got drafted to a team that wasn't a good fit for me personally, it wasn't a good locker room. Like, it just wasn't a good fit for who I was coming from Ohio State when I went to Minnesota, and I was miserable. And I'll tell you right now that when I got there, I had a bad attitude, and it probably didn't help me. In the long run, especially now with the new coaching staff. But, like, I say that because Cam Ward, Shador, whoever it may be that the Browns draft, if they take a quarterback, that guy's going to come here and probably you'll get a different result maybe at 31 other places where he goes. But that is the deal.
I couldn't
Before
agree
you guys
more
chime in
with
on that
you.
real quick, Jay, Dustin, do you have any issue with Jim Nagy saying what he said, though?
No, because what he's saying, well, number one, Jaden Daniels is the reason why that class is going to be an all-time great class, because
Bo
I
Nix
think
helps it too.
Sure, but when you've got a quarterback that just did what Daniels did as a rookie,
Set the new standard.
it sets the bar really high. And then Nix went to the playoffs, okay? And people think McCarthy's going to be a really good player. Yeah, we'll see. I mean,
statistically, Caleb Williams
there's been some pretty darn good quarterback classes that have come out here recently since 2017.
I have no problem with what he said. I think it's true. I don't know that necessarily Bo Nix would have been drafted ahead of Cam Ward, let's say, if Cam was in last year's draft. I don't know that for sure. I think the grade that most scouts had on Bo Nix was a late first round, early second round grade. It was out of necessity. Denver needed one, and then he was left. And so, and the way they're looking at it now, they're on their knees praying to the football gods. Thank you. We would not have done that. That was not our plan. Right. Even though I think they've gone on record now saying that they love that kid all along. Well, they got their guy, and it's a perfect fit for them. To your point, if there are so many more variables that go into evaluating quarterbacks. And I don't know how you prioritize the most important. I've talked to scouts about this. I've talked to head coaches about this. I've talked to general managers about this. I'm fascinated by this. And I had a conversation with Tim Couch about this at one point. So if you're building the quarterback in the lab and you have 10 clubs that go in the bag, like on your golf game, you're putting your putter first because it's the most important club. Everybody thinks it's the driver. It's not. The putter is the most important. So
For me, it's my sandwich, but yeah, good.
well, it's
My
different
baby.
for most
I know,
people. It's
but-
the putter. If
but
you
the
putt
short
well,
game, man, yes,
I
it's
tell
so
everyone
vital.
this: cut your putts in half, your handicap falls substantially.
Yeah.
It's on the green. Well, so I'm fascinated by the way people that have studied the game for a lifetime prioritize the skill set necessary to be a great quarterback. And I've gotten, by the way, you talk to 10 people, you might get 8 different number one answers. I've had, the one I get the most is decision making and mental ability. And to your point, can they learn the offense? There's a famous clip. I wish I had it ready and I would show it. Drew Brees was a guest on the Stephen Colbert Show. And Colbert, like me, was fascinated by the play sequence call.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
It
was
is
great.
one of the most
Great.
fascinating clips you'll ever see. Just YouTube it, Google it.
I saw it.
It's worth the watch. What Drew does is he said, well, he said, how do you remember? How do these guys remember everything? He goes, no, they don't.
They don't have to.
There is a sequence in there for the linemen, for the wide receivers, for the running backs, and they're listening for their cue. And so an average call might be a full sentence long. Everybody in the huddle is just listening for the part that they need to know.
Yep.
And then he tripped everybody out, including Colbert, when he said, and then, as difficult as that is, after I go through all of that, then I'll say, kill, and then he'll read another long sequence. Literally, the time it takes to call the play is about 8 to 10 seconds. And they're doing it at warp speed, which Drew did on the show, which you can really appreciate. So he rips through this play call, and then he gets to the kill and says, now that is, if I decide at the line of scrimmage to kill the play, now we're going to this. And in that moment, you get the real grasp of how intelligent these guys have to be. They have to be. There is no dummy playing quarterback in the NFL, for starters. So that's why the number one answer for me in the people that I've talked to, they always say, up here. And then they'll go arm, legs, athleticism, size. You know, there's all these different clubs that they're putting in their bag. But what's crazy to me is there is no manual for how to do it. You mentioned, what do they like? What do their friends like? That's a club too, because in Johnny Manziel's
What's
case,
he doing in his spare time? What's his
he
hobbies?
destroyed the competition in college and got here, and because he didn't have the work ethic and because he didn't have the right people around him, he failed spectacularly. And I will make one other point. Always keep this in mind. The teams that are drafting these players are, for the most part, dysfunctional. They won 1 game last year or 3 games last year. So they're not the Steelers.
Such a great point.
They're not the teams that live at the top of the food chain. They're teams that, by definition, have some dysfunction. And that makes it even more difficult.
Just to go back to me for 1 second, because I went to a dysfunctional organization.
You did.
The Vikings. It was
a horrible
the sex
situation
boat
for you.
scandal of my rookie year. That was the team that I went into. I think 4 or 5 of the guys on that team are in prison right now.
Are they really?
Yes, bad guys, dude, bad guys.
Wow.
Anyway, I remember I was in Minnesota. This is my rookie year, and the Buckeyes were playing the Gophers. And I came to the team dinner, and I sat with Tressel, as the captain, spoke to the team. And we were talking, and Tress was just like, he got it. Because he understood what sort of program I came from, what sort of person I was.
And the culture.
And the culture. And I went in there, I was fish out of water.
Sure.
I didn't belong. And I was uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. And frankly, it ended up being just a really awful situation.
So these young guys with all this talent get drafted by dysfunctional teams, and oftentimes the intoxication, again, I'll come back to that, it's overwhelming when you have a number 1 overall pick sitting there behind a Tyrod Taylor or a guy that you know isn't the answer. The fan base starts chirping. The crowd starts chanting. The media starts writing. And the intoxication is, get him in there. Look at the Green Bay Packers as an organization that never spends time at the bottom of the food chain. And look at, when it comes to the most important position in all of sports, look at their transition in that position. Not to say they haven't had some misses, but they go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. And what one thing did all of that progression have in common? Brett learned in Atlanta, so came in with some experience. Aaron sat for years behind Brett and watched how this most important position in sports is supposed to be handled. And so did Jordan Love. Succession plan on your schedule is much more successful when it happens off schedule by necessity.
I also think, I'm sorry, Garrett, I want you in here. I think it's interesting when teams play guys early, how many more times, oftentimes than not, those guys struggle.
They do.
You know, you got
now there are exceptions.
You got to be
Daniels.
Jaden Daniels. You got to be a special cat.
Yep.
To be able to come in as a rookie from day one and just tear it up. It just doesn't happen.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like you mentioned earlier, Jay, Bryce Young. You mentioned Anthony Richardson. Those guys were forced into playing for teams that were really not ready to go.
And horrible organizations.
Right.
Typically.
Right.
I think
Sorry.
when you look at it, I think the most important thing to me is, like intelligence is key. Arm strength, leadership. Are you resilient? Do you have tough skin? Do you get it? Do you take yourself seriously or not? I think for me, the biggest thing is processing. Can you process what a defense is trying to do to you in under 2 seconds?
See, I agree with that. I kind of put that in with intelligence.
Yeah, that.
But it is like a grace under fire thing.
Dude, you can't just tell by the Wonderlic scores how these guys can get into a huddle and regurgitate what Drew Brees did on Stephen Colbert.
Can't do it.
And then there's pre-snap. That's just like you got. So you throw on top of that, you just had to regurgitate all that stuff. Then you get to the line of scrimmage.
You got to see defense pre-snap. They're going to give you a bit of a disguise.
They're going to give you a fake read.
Window dressing, if you will, and then all of a sudden you got to figure out what the hell they're doing, and then decide if you want to kill the play and call it something else.
And then once the ball is snapped, now your decision making really kicks
oh shit, the safety's not in the middle of the field anymore.
Wasn't even cover 2. This was cover 3. They fooled me. Or if you're really good, they just make it up. Like if you're the top of the food chain, they just say, "Hey, I know we
Kelsey Mahomes, man.
Yeah, like we're gonna break all tendency. We're gonna act like we're in cover 2, but we're gonna be in cover 2 on this side, but we're in man coverage and the defensive. They doing all this other stuff, and they doing that in the locker room to make you feel you're confused. I think the most uncomfortable thing about drafting a quarterback is it's completely luck. And no one, it's almost like this. Like I'm sure there's some mathematician out there that I got smart one year and was like, yeah, let me look at these algorithms. There has to be an algorithm that can tell me how to win the lottery. And then they're like, no.
Yeah.
They're like, there's a Powerball. When they add one more number, here's how your statistics jump up greatly. And with a quarterback, you have all of these skill sets, all of these different variables, and all of them are important. And just one of them going wrong can screw up all the other ones.
I absolutely love that analogy because you've got to get 6 balls with the 6th one being a completely new pool of numbers. You've got to hit on all of them. And if one of them is wrong, you've got a worthless ticket. But if you hit on all of them, you've got hundreds of millions of dollars in riches.
You got Joe Burrow or
Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson.
Or did you it even comes to you in losing. I watched Josh Allen after that game, and he sat there.
Mm-hmm. Lamar Jackson has too.
On that podium and was like, and you could tell he's processing.
Did you see the?
Yeah,
that he's processing.
I got to live with this for another 12 months.
And even in that loss, he understands it. I'm bearing it the most. It isn't them. I didn't get it done when I needed to.
Right.
And it didn't even need to be said. And it was that
even when your tight end drops a ball that keeps the drive alive.
Right. Even when he took the deep breath and said, I'm going to feel bad for myself for about 48 hours, and I guarantee he's working out right now.
He's
finding a way to get better. I promise you, and we're Bills fans in my home, and my son has no doubt that they're going to be back.
Right.
Because of that guy.
I agree with that.
And you see that confidence? There's a difference between when you lose like that and you got a guy, you're like, hey, listen, no problem. Hey, man, we had a great year. We're going to be back, though.
Right.
You're not arguing and fighting, talking about who's going to get fired. You're like, we're going to be back. We played a great team. They had a great quarterback. Listen, but we're going to get it done. And that is the most brilliant thing to me, and why football is the best sport, because you got to have a lot of things go right.
It's that orchestra.
It's everything that
Justin,
comes together.
On Monday, you weren't here, but I made this statement. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I think the AFC right now is almost exactly like it was during another heyday of great quarterbacks in the conference. What I see now in the AFC is Patrick Mahomes playing the part of Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson playing the role of Peyton Manning, and Josh Allen playing the role of Ben Roethlisberger.
Or Breeze, or whoever.
Breeze was
And
in
Breeze
the
was
NFC.
in there.
But
AFC, yeah,
I'm
sorry.
talking about
Yeah.
what
I gotcha.
specifically in the conference. What's so...
Who's Phillip Rivers? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, look at Phillip Rivers for his career. He was the guy that never got one.
He's going to be a Hall of Famer, by the way.
Of course he is.
And people forget about that, but like he was, because he played with those other awesome dudes.
He played with 3 other guys at almost the exact same times. There was some overlap in their careers, but for most part, the bulks of their careers with those 4 guys. And Phillip Rivers is the odd guy out in this conversation. And by the way, I mentioned what's going on in the AFC right now. Who's Joe Burrow? Like, who is he?
Great question.
So you've got in the AFC this quagmire. You've got this, what reminds me of somehow Manning managed to get it done.
Somehow
and
Flacco
win 2
got it
Super
done.
Bowls.
Flacco
snuck in there and got one. But also Roethlisberger won Super Bowls.
And then Russell Wilson's in there.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I saw a stat, Jay, since the
Yeah.
turn of the century, since the year 2000, the NFC, and I hope I'm getting this right, the NFC's had 23 different quarterbacks.
Yeah, I
and
saw
the
that too.
AFC is 7.
Yeah, and that's
in the
why.
last 25 years.
Because that's where they were, and that's where they are. So the path to the NFC, or to the Super Bowl in the NFC, has been notably easier over the last 30 years than it was and is in the AFC.
It's so, not only the conference, but the division is stacked, because
Unbelievable.
for the next decade you got to face Burrow and Lamar,
Yeah.
and Pittsburgh. Every year at Pittsburgh is a loss, pretty much.
You know,
because they're just going to out-tough you.
You know, I live in my fears. I said Monday also, and I like Will Howard a lot. I don't like him at 2 at all. I like him a lot if I can get him in the 2nd or the 3rd round. Living in my fears, wake up with this nightmare. Everyone passes. The Steelers get him, and he becomes Ben Part 2, a guy we should have taken, a guy that was built for our division, size, pedigree, and that's the kind of thing that Pittsburgh would get right and that we would mess up.
I have a funny feeling Pittsburgh's going to get Jalen Milroe.
I'd be fine with that. I'd cheer that move. Just like I cheered when they drafted Kenny Pickett. When
they
they drafted Kenny Pickett, I said, oh my God, I love this. This guy's not an NFL quarterback.
I don't like that.
I think Milroe's going to be a good quarterback.
I don't.
They're going to grab. They're going to get. Now, here's who they will draft. They're drafting Jack Sawyer.
Oh,
Well,
Pittsburgh?
that's
Oh, hell
another
yeah.
one. They always take the Ohio State studs.
They're drafting Jack Sawyer.
I mean, if you look at the
You know what you're
Ohio
gonna get.
State talent that's been on their roster, and I did this, the Browns, up until about 5 years ago, because that's when I did it, the Browns had only drafted like 8 Buckeyes ever. They, for whatever reason, and it's all the regimes, have had this thing against taking Ohio State players. That's not a good plan. Like the teams that you should draft players from are the blue bloods in college football.
Yeah, and the one that's 90 minutes down the road. That you should be at every
It's a no-brainer. And a lot of these kids are from the state of Ohio.
They should know Will Howard's Social Security number by heart.
I hope they do.
Seriously, like
Do
why
you
do
think
you
he's
not?
going to translate at the next level? And if not, what will keep him from being a success?
Man, I don't know. I don't know that there's one thing that could hold him back. I just think that we only saw him for a year.
Yeah.
And there's so much pressure on him.
He had a body of work before that
but
where
who
he
watched-
was good.
I didn't watch Kansas State.
No, but we know this.
He was good.
We know that as they looked at the landscape of all the quarterbacks they could pull from, they got it right. They got the right guy.
He ran the ball. He ran the ball so much at Kansas State.
Yeah.
And then when he got to,
They didn't even let him throw the ball at Kansas State.
I want to give you this.
But that's why I like him so much. When he had to throw the ball, that guy was throwing dots.
In 1 year, in 1 year to go from a running quarterback to
a throwing quarterback.
throwing quarterback, I was like, oh, I didn't know you had that in your game. I'll give him credit for that because, I mean, they put the ball in. I mean, that was a big time throw against Notre Dame.
He
The
made
Jeremiah
big-time throws in all 4 playoff games.
That was a big-time throw, and he can use his legs. I will give you one thing about him. He's a leader. Like
guys
rally around him. Like
and I got to tell you, when the season started, especially after the Oregon game, I thought his decision-making was flawed. I still don't like the way he handled the clock. But what I love most about him was he absolutely threw his arms around that failure. He did interviews in which he said, I'm going to be honest here, I still wake up at night where I'm having that nightmare where it's 20 seconds left again.
Yeah.
And he put it in his crawl and made him better. He embraced his failure. He learned from it, and he overcame all of these incredible obstacles. Look, after the Michigan game, they were done. They were done. And this kid helped take this program to the pinnacle. And
that adversity is not something to,
don't dismiss it.
Don't take it for granted because
it crushes smaller.
There are a lot of people out there, most people, by the way,
that fold under
crumble.
That. Yes, and he did not.
They can't deal with it and can't keep things together. And that dude, give him a lot of credit because Ryan did a hell of a job too with the team. He's the leader, but the quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not going to hate. If they end up with him, I'm not going to hate it.
And not to mention, for a guy who spent less than a year with this team, to get everyone bought into him,
and the way he talks about it. He's going to miss his Ohio State experience more than all the other guys. When you hear him do interviews, he says, this is my family. This is my brotherhood. My regret is I only got 1 year here.
Yeah.
I love the kid.
Yeah, I do too.
Maybe he'll fail. I hope he doesn't. But I would not be disappointed
for kids like that,
if he ends up here in Cleveland. I would not be disappointed about that at all.
All right, we got Super Chats, and then we're going to show Bull's 10-yard dash at the end of the show. But we got Super Chats first here. The first one comes from Forceman47, who says, any money paid to Kirk on his next contract is subtracted from what Atlanta owes him. He's not getting $30 million from anyone, so he'll sign for the vet million.
Got it.
That's what. Exactly. And I said that.
I needed that explained to me. I'm not that smart.
G. Bush's bad neck says, I know, guys, we talk a lot about Kirk Cousins, but I think the Browns should call the Rams and see the price for Matt Stafford.
Oh, they can't afford Matt Stafford.
Why would Matt Stafford's like, nah, I'm cool, I'll retire.
Yeah, and Sean McVay is hearing that saying not yet.
Like he's
Did you see him in this postseason? Like in the last couple of games, he's still
cooking.
I'll take him any day of the week. I wouldn't think 9 wins if we got him.
No,
now I'm thinking 11 or 12.
11 with that.
Dude, they could be in the Super Bowl right now.
I'm
telling you, if it doesn't snow in Philadelphia, I think they played last weekend.
I agree.
This past weekend.
I agree.